happy hour. I hope you're enjoying your cocktail or your mocktail. If you don't drink, I am your host here with Forward Miami Show. I'm Jonathan Casanas. For those of you who don't know, Forward Miami is a nonprofit organization that promotes inclusivity, diversity, and community empowerment through our cultural events like Gay Ultra Festival, our Forward America's Human Rights Symposium, and some other events that we have throughout the year. We are lucky enough to have this beautiful platform thanks to Miami Community Newspapers, so we're thankful to them for that. So hopefully you get to enjoy this, and it's Friday and it's the holidays, so whatever I say can't really upset you too much because it is Friday. So the last time I was here, I was able to talk about mental health and how it affects the child when they're coming out. This week, we get to dig a little deeper and go into spirituality, which is great. So I brought my friend here who has 30 years of experience, and he's a sought-after spiritual teacher, a personal transformation coach, and leading voice in the breathwork community. He has traveled the world offering inspiring and transformational retreats, combining psychological and spiritual teachings with lasting and life-changing effects. And I have to read this because it is quite the intro. He's an award-winning, critically acclaimed author. He has spoken at numerous universities and conferences like our little one. So thanks for blessing us at our Forward America Symposium. And he has written a new book, Awakening the Soul of Power, which was described by multi-Grammy Award winner Gloria Estefan as a balm for the soul of anyone searching for truth and answers to life's difficult questions. Wow. And I definitely want to mention his website before I forget, is soulfulpower.com. Welcome, my friend, Christian de la Huerta.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm so happy and honored to be here and to be celebrating the holidays.
Yes, it's actually a perfect time for you to be here because, well, things get a little hectic, especially now during the pandemic and kind of wars between families when trying to deal with presents and knowing which house to go to during the holidays. So it's always good to kind of center oneself and talk to someone to be able to find some tools to be able to all get along. And you've been a busy bee during the pandemic. You finished a book.
Yeah, you know.
I don't know what I did, but you finished a book during the pandemic. That's pretty incredible.
You know what? It's I know how horrible the pandemic's been worldwide. For me, it's been a blessing. You know, I was able to finish this book
that's amazing.
That I've been brewing for like 8-10 years, but I was traveling so much. This is the first time that I haven't been on a plane in more than 6 months since I don't even know when.
Yeah.
So just being in one place and not doing retreats and workshops all the time is what allowed me to just drop in and finally get it out of me.
So what was that process like? I mean, it was obviously changing, but what was that process like? Usually when people write a book, it's a lot. You have to dig deep and find something in you.
Yeah, you know, and if particularly the stuff that I write about, it's deep stuff, and because of my own sense of integrity is like, it's not just stuff that I believe or think it's a good idea. It's like stuff that I actually live.
Yeah.
So that's why it takes a while to brew it, because I want to make sure that I'm living it. I'm testing it out in retreats. I'm testing it out with private clients. So yeah. And it took, you know, some of the writing books tell you that you just got to learn to get in the habit of your hours, right? You start off your day from 7 to 9 or whenever, and that's when you write. I've never been able to learn that. I've never been able to do that. So for me, it took, because I'm in and out. I feel like I'm in and out of different projects and different aspects of my mind. And this is what just allowed me to drop in and to finish it.
So let's talk about the book, Awakening the Soul of Power. What's it about? What do people get from it?
Yeah, here, let me show it.
Yeah, good idea.
It's you know, it's the purpose of it is that a lot of us, I would even say most of us, have an ambivalent relationship to power. Like we want it, but we're kind of afraid of it. And the more that I've worked with people in retreats over all this time, I think what we're afraid of ultimately is that we're going to abuse it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we've been conditioned to think that power is a bad thing, right? So like how many times have we heard power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so what good person is going to want to be corrupted, right? So when we reject it, but what they didn't tell us about that quote is that originally they were talking about, it was taken out of context. It was talking about political power specifically, not about interpersonal power that we're talking about here. And then add to that this whole other layer, which is we're also been conditioned to be terrified of the emotions. So we've labeled the emotions weakness, so we run away from them. And we avoid conflict like the plague. We avoid confrontation. We fear that our relationships will come to an end if we said what we really feel. So how many times do we end up saying yes when inside is like a total no? Like, this is not okay with me. And yet, to avoid conflict or for illusions, for morsels of pseudo love and acceptance, we override that and we say yes. But it's not an effective strategy.
Well, it's interesting coming from you, because I know you mentioned in your book, you came from Cuba by way of Spain, but once your parents had applied for a visa to leave, you were treated horribly.
Yeah.
So you felt that power, that abuse of power.
Yeah.
But then you came to this person, which is pretty interesting. Well, how was that like? I mean, let's get to know you a little bit. And, how did it become that, from that kind of trauma, that turmoil that you went through, you became to be Christian de la Huerta?
And that's a great question, because I'm a really kind of unlikely person to be writing about heroism and what it means to live heroically and personal power, because of what you're talking about. I grew up in communist Cuba my first 10 years. And so it was a very hierarchical, and it was the choices were either by the government or the church, or even though the church had definitely a diminished status in that country. And then it was definitely a patriarchal culture, even though at home my mom was, because my dad was working most of the time, my mom was the one who kind of ruled the roost. And then you're right. Like the minute that you applied for a visa, we were called gusanos, which means worm. So my sister and I, who used to be at the top of the class up until that moment, the minute we applied for permit to leave, like we were ostracized. Like not only would the teachers call us gusanos, but at break, they wouldn't, all the other kids got milk and cookies. We didn't get anything, and no more awards. Like that was it. So, and then then we come to the States, and we lived the first 3 years in Milledgeville, Georgia, which was a really, really small kind of redneck town. And again, I stood out and felt very different because I didn't even speak the language, and didn't understand, like the culture, like football. You want me to do what? You want me to go in there and get knocked down? It's like, I don't think so. I don't think I like this game.
Culture shock.
Culture shock. So, but the purpose, I mean, the important part about that is like, and then another layer of that is how shy I was. I was so painfully shy. Like I was okay one-on-one. If you added a third person, clammed up. And I was so emotionally unaware that I couldn't tell you what I was feeling, because I had no idea what I was feeling. And so all that to say that if I can step into my own power, and the book will walk you by the hand about what that means and how we do that. It's like, I know anybody can. There's no question in my mind.
But I know you didn't, I mean, this wasn't like a lifelong thing. You found, I think you were going to go into psychology, you went to school, and then you kind of found this more spiritual world thereafter, right? Talk to me about that transition.
Yeah, I studied psychology. I got my bachelor's in psychology. My dad was a psychiatrist. So I come out of the psychotherapy tradition. And 30 years ago, a little bit over 30 years ago, I discovered breath work. And I'd been searching for more. I had a very enviable life then. Nice cushy job, apartment on the water in South Beach before I moved away to California, and eventually came back a few years ago. But the more that I had, and the more that I was sought after, the more that it seemed like there was something missing. Like I kept thinking there has to be more to life, and I had a really enviable life. And so that's when I started to search. And like many LGBTQ people, I grew up in a very Catholic environment, and yet, it's like struggling with my sexual identity, with being gay, which I knew at a very young age that I was, and trying to find a place to in a religion that didn't have a room for me. That, like part of me, like I actually thought I wanted to be a priest, and so part of me wanted to serve the sacred as I understood it then, but trying to do that in a religion that told me that I was going to burn in hell for eternity. Like no wonder my adolescence was one long depression.
Yeah.
So
Understandable.
So in my 20s, I kind of went through a phase where, like, I tell you how the struggle ended. Three things happened. I actually had a meeting with the head of the novitiate, the guy who decided who got into the Jesuit order. I went to Jesuit high school down here locally.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he said, well, let's do a couple of things. Why don't you do a couple of years of college and then we'll talk. Thankfully, he was a wise man, because in those 2 years, several things happened. First thing was I took a philosophy class in existentialism, which began this whole process of questioning, life and questioning the Catholic worldview, which I didn't even know you could question. Then I had a phase of experimentation with mind-expanding substances.
Got it.
And then the third one is I fell in love. And I've been very active sexually as a teenager, but always it was dark and secret and nobody knew about it. And
well, it makes sense given the times as well.
Yeah, for the times, yeah. And for the first time, it's like love and sex were combined.
Right.
And the combination of those three things was powerful. Like after that, the Jesuits never stood a chance.
As it was. And so how did you the rumor has it that not rumor, I heard through the grapevine that you kind of went away and you decided to kind of be peaceful, even may have lived with the monks, if you will. Is that a true story?
Yeah. I joined an ashram. I was part of an ashram.
Oh, wow.
Of a spiritual community in Eastern-based Buddhist Hindu flavor.
Yeah.
Both the hardest thing I've ever done, and like I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for that.
Right.
And that's when everything started to shift. That's when I started to understand.
Yeah.
Started to understand, like.
But how did you get to that place? How did you finally decide that was where you were going?
I mean, it's a long story, but as part of my searching, once I got to that place that I was telling you about, that there has to be more.
Yeah.
Like I think once we get to that place of readiness, like something happens. A teacher appears. Like the saying goes, when the student's ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
So I was ready. I was ready for more. I was ready to, I was dissatisfied.
Yeah.
With life. Like there has to be more. And so I discovered breathwork, and when I discovered breathwork as a healing modality and a spiritual practice, it's like I never went for the PhD in psychology.
Well, it sounds intense, right? Like if someone, the viewers know zero about breathwork, explain what breathwork is and what it does for you.
Yeah, and we could do the whole session on that. But breathing, I mean, breathwork is a real simple breathing practice. You breathe in a certain way for about an hour, and amazing stuff happens. Like I don't know anything more effective in terms of healing past trauma. And I'm telling you, I deal with serious trauma. I deal with people who've experienced sexual abuse, been raped, who've experienced violent victims of violent crime. Who've lost loved ones in dramatic ways, and it works.
Yeah.
And it heals at so many levels. And not only does it heal mentally and psychologically, but it heals spiritually and even physically. And I know that sounds too good to be true.
But meaning it allows them to be at peace with what has happened in their lives.
On top of that, and the way that it works is, and the reason that, and with all due respect to psychotherapy, in the right hands, with clear goals, it can be incredibly supportive and healing. So I'm not knocking it at all.
Yeah.
And we all know that you can sit on somebody's couch for 5, 10, 20, 30 years at a time because they come to me and nothing really happens. The reason for that is you can talk about it ad nauseum. You can understand what happened to you when your parents divorced when you were 5, and this happened and the other thing happens. You can understand the effect of it, and it doesn't drop down to the behavioral changes because that trauma now lives in the body. Yeah. So it's been somaticized. The beauty of breathwork is that it bypasses the mind and it goes to the core of where that trauma lives and it clears it.
And so how do you sell that to someone? Because I feel like a lot of us need it, especially in my age group and even younger. And I have family members who are mental health counselors as well. So I understand both ends, and you get it too, because there's several lifestyles you've lived, and obviously you took the psychological path, and now you took a more spiritual path. So, but how do you sell that to someone like me, who has never been exposed to that, does never even really thought of it, but understands that there needs to be a change for them to start healing in some way?
Just give it a try.
Yeah.
Just give it a try. It's like, to the scientific part of my mind, it's hard to explain how it works. Science isn't there yet in terms of like giving us the explanation of how it works scientifically in the brain, how breathing can be so powerful. Just from breathing, and all this stuff can happen, because on top of that, all the healing, you can have some of the most amazing, profound, ecstatic moments of bliss and unity and feeling connected to everything that I've ever experienced. And in fact, a lot of people who have experimented with mind expanding substances and plant medicines and that kind of stuff make those connections. You can achieve some of those very same states just using your breath, and it's legal, and there's no hangover.
Right.
And so I would just say, I can't argue with the results. Like, I've been doing it for 30 years all over the world. I went to last year, I guess it was, before COVID, I went to China 4 times, and I was working with high level executives and millionaires and billionaires, and
even celebrities.
Celebrities. And it works. I can't argue with the results. It works, and it's so simple.
That's great. And I know that you, through this breath work, there's a lot of healing, but there's also a lot of, finding yourself in that process, because I've done your courses. I think it took me about 3 or 4 times for me to finally realize what it was, because I wasn't allowing myself to open up to it. And there was some healing, but way after. So it's definitely a process. You have to put the work in, but more than that, there was more of like an understanding that the healing comes in many different forms. How do you explain to somebody, where that healing starts, or where it comes from, or how to see that when it doesn't come as, okay, I feel better today, or maybe it comes in because you feel more heroic, like in your book, or you feel like you have a better relationship with someone. Like, how does it come, these types of results, if you will?
Like, I'll give you like in some cases, one session. For me, my first session, I knew that I would never be the same. I wasn't. Like, one session is what it took, and I came out of it knowing that I had to do it again. I didn't care what it cost, where I had to go to do it. Like, I knew I had to do it. It's like, this is what I was looking for. And then for some people, like in your case, maybe approach it a little bit more guardedly. It takes a couple of sessions. So sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's like blows your pants off. Regardless, the healing and the change is guaranteed. Like, let me give you this example, which connects to another, one of the things of the book, which is the power of forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness. At a retreat not too long ago, I was working with a woman who had gotten divorced, and she came in and she was all upset because her husband wasn't signing off. She was carrying the weight of this house that they both owned, and he wasn't living there. She was having to carry all the financial weight, and yet he wouldn't sign off on it so that she could sell it, or he was blocking it in some way. And so I started talking about the power of forgiveness and how important it is to do that, because as long as we're holding somebody for what they did or failed to do over the fire, like, our hands also getting burnt. So she said, oh, no, I can't. This is not all right. I will not forgive him by the end of the weekend, by the 4th breathwork session of the weekend, because we do them back to back when we're able to have retreats live. She saw herself, and she was like kind of floating above, and she saw her husband lying down on his bed, and she kind of floated above like an angel. She descended and just kissed him on the forehead. And what that let us know is that she had forgiven him. Like, forgiveness had happened. That was on Sunday. On Monday, he called to say that he was signing the paperwork. And that the household right away. And which is what I kept telling her. It's not about the house.
Right.
This is about your relationship with him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tough. It's just tough to describe. It's because it's so universal. It's so it's so out there that it's either you believe it or you don't, which is interesting. But when you experience it, there's no going back. You're like, yeah, this is how it is.
But yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, I know what it did for me personally in my life, and I've witnessed it thousands of times, like dramatic change, and it's irreversible.
Yeah.
Like,
so there's
once
a lot
it happens,
of things,
it happens.
There's a lot of things happening now in the pandemic. Obviously, we're getting like, cabin fever, and we're starting to argue. And now the holidays are getting intense. People are fighting, over politics and these types of things. So how do people use your book to kind of to sail through these kind of rough waters?
Well, I would say, I'll talk about the book in a minute in that context, but I would say like using the breath, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the most effective way to bring ourselves back to center. So no matter what's going on in our lives, no matter what drama is going on around us, remembering that we have a choice. Like, right, we can have other people around us have their drama. We don't have to get sucked into it.
Oh my God, yeah.
So that's the primary choice, and it is a choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes, of course, it's easier to do than others. But the more that we heal ourselves, the less that we take things personally, so that we can, like, people come at us with attacks or accusations or challenging or things that we interpret as betrayal or judgment. The more, the stronger our sense of self, which is what the book helps us to get to, the less that we are at the effect, that we're impacted by other people and their judgments and their expectations and their demands of us. The breath is like, it's the most effective tool that I know of. Like, right. So because what happens is when we start getting upset, right, when those pesky emotions start coming up, whether it's anger or fear or anxiety, whatever it is, we stop breathing. And when we shut down the breathing, when we feel threatened or we're trying to suppress those emotions, it's like, that's what anchors those emotions in the body. And then you've got to come spend a perfectly beautiful evening or a weekend with me breathing to get rid of them. So let's nip it at the bud, right? When you start feeling those emotions, don't repress them, because that's not the way out. Because if you suppress the emotions, they have to come out somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So either we repress them and we repress them and we repress them, and then we explode inappropriately, because we walk around like repressed cauldrons of emotions and rage. Or that energy, which is what the emotions are, has to come out, right? So then it starts showing up in disease, bodily symptoms, cancer, heart attacks, ulcers. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no way around it. We have to learn how to express those emotions. So first of all, we give ourselves permission to feel them and to learn how to express and communicate those emotions responsibly, courageously, and compassionately, right? With courage, because it takes courage, and yet not just dumping them on somebody else like a 2-year-old having a tantrum, but learning how to communicate those emotions in a way they can hear them.
Yeah.
And we can talk about how to do that too. The breath comes in. There's swamis in India that have that much control over their body that they can tell their hearts to slow down, and they will. Some of them can mimic states that are like so close to death that they're hard to tell whether they're death or alive. Most of us aren't there yet. We'll probably never be at that level. But anybody can slow down the breath, right? Anybody can slow down the breath. It's not hard. All it takes is the presence of awareness in the moment and the choice, right? To slow down the breath. What happens when we slow down the breath is it's simple. The heart has no choice. The heart has to slow down.
Right.
So when we slow down the breath, the heart slows down, then the body begins to relax, the nervous system begins to quiet down, right? And then we can retain that element of choice, right? And I think of, often speak about it as we learn how to be the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
Right. So we can have all the drama, everybody, all the dramas and their judgments and what they think and their perceptions. We remain center. We engage as we need to. We clear boundaries as we need to, but yeah,
that's it. I stop. Like every time I put my finger in, I just get sucked right into it. So I'm the pressure cooker. I stay, and then I blow up and I become the football player that runs through the wall. I'm that guy. Yeah. So I need to stop doing that.
And how effective is that?
Oh, not effective at all.
Yeah, no.
I'm the one that gets hurt, right? I'm the one that ran through the wall.
right. And then we make messes in our relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're salvageable, sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
And then we got to go clean up the mess.
Yeah, exactly. It's always good to just start from the beginning.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean like we're talking about empowerment, right? So we're not. It doesn't mean we're becoming doormats.
Yeah.
On the contrary, right? What we're doing is we're talking about how do we step into power in a different way, right? Because that's part of what I write about in the book, is that we confuse the way that the world does power with the power that comes from within, which I call soulful power or spiritual power. And so there's differences.
Yeah.
So, for example, worldly power is we tend to associate with things outside of us, externals. We tend to think people who are powerful, have money, they have fame, they're have some political status, up in some kind of corporate ladder or some social hierarchy. The thing about all those qualities is they're outside of us. So they're impermanent, right? They're here today, gone tomorrow. Yeah. Whereas the kind of power that's what I'm talking about, that soulful power, it's inside of us. Nobody can give that to us. Nobody can take it away. And it's actually even more powerful. Right? So think about worldly power. It's kind of all about appearances. Think of, it's like self-aggrandizing. It's like a turkey blowing itself up to seem bigger as part of the mating dance. Soulful power is humble. Like, it doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. It knows that it's powerful, right?
Yeah.
Powerful people know, like authentically powerful people know, and they don't need to prove anything. They don't need anybody's approval or validation. So I think of, an example I often use is Gandhi or Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. Simple, humble, their little monastic robes and sandal feet. You would never know how much power they hold until it's needed.
Yeah.
And then watch out.
Yeah, and there's a lot to that. It's so sexy to be cool and calm, collective, not things bother you, because there's an energy about you that couldn't care less, and nothing's going to bother them. That goes on into the rest of the atmosphere in the room. You're like, wow, who is this guy?
Yeah. I think it's sexy too.
I
think it's sexy too, and I think you care though. I think you care deeply.
Yeah.
But in a non-attached way. Like in a self-sufficient way. Because the thing is, like, when we get sucked into other people's drama, like when we get enmeshed in their drama, then we're down there rolling in the muck with them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we can't help, right? We don't have that sense of perspective. We're down in it with them.
Yeah.
When we retain our sense of self, then you can do it with complete and profound love and compassion. But we don't have to get sucked into it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, like I could have, I could care about what you're going through.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna allow myself to have my energy sucked.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And from that perch of perspective, I can help, right? Because I can see what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm not down in it with you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it's always like, people always say, oh, it comes with age, right? How do you teach someone that without having to go through life? Because we need to know. Get the book Awakening.
Seriously, this is what I wish I would have known when I was 20.
Yeah.
There are two things that I always include in every retreat, no matter what the theme of the retreat is. One is the breath work, because I don't know anything more effective in terms of healing.
Yeah.
The other one is teaching how the ego mind works.
What does that mean exactly?
Because when I first understood how the ego mind works, it was like, oh my God, that's what I needed to know, to understand why I did the things I did, why I caught into these unhealthy, self-sabotaging behavior patterns, repetitive patterns in relationships that sometimes it felt like the same boring play with a different actor.
Yeah.
So I began to was like, oh my God, that's what I needed to know. And I didn't get it from my psychiatrist dad. I didn't get it from any psychology teacher in college. So understanding how this part of us works is primary. And it's, I mean, there's we could do a whole episode on that too. And it's critical, but one way that we can just simply talk about what the ego is, it's a part of the mind that makes sense of sensory information that would otherwise be overwhelming. It can reach into the past and reference the past. It can project into the future, and somehow it weaves all of that information into a sense of self, like a coherent sense of personality. This is Christian, that's JC.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's ultimately illusion, and both a leap in evolution and and the source of all our suffering. Like, here's a great metaphor. If you put a baseball in the center of a stadium, that's what the ego is. It's just a tiny part of us. Who we are is actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny, tiny, tiny part of who we are to think that it is all of who we are, and to make its choices, like significant life choices, from its very small, tiny, and limited, and always fear-based perspective. So part of what I do in the book is explain how the ego works so that we can all see it in ourselves, and with very practical exercises, start applying it to our lives so that we can bust ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So that we can break free from those patterns. And as we do that and we start having a whole other level of experience.
And the book would allow you to call yourself out, because I'm normally the guy. I'm normally the guy that someone's like, you're being horrible right now. Like, this is obviously, ego driven. And then I have to sit back and be like, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I read your book, will I be able to guide myself into catching those moments?
Yes.
Because
I mean, if you do it honestly.
Right. Okay.
I mean, and the ego is just part of the human experience. We all got one.
Yeah.
So it's just part of who we are.
And we need one.
We need one. It's not all bad.
Sure.
So what we're going for is not getting rid of it, not killing it, not annihilating it, which some spiritual teachings talk about.
Yeah.
My understanding of it is that it's, as long as we're in a body, it's not a bad thing to have a sense of self.
Yeah. But what's the good side of having an ego?
Well, that having a sense of self, of individual identity, it's also good for planning, for strategizing, it loves projects. So it does have some good functions.
Yeah.
The thing is just realizing that is not who we are. So rather, the ego has kind of hijacked things, and it thinks that it is the sun. Yeah. Right? It has placed itself as if it were the sun when it's not. It's just a tiny little pebble. So what we're going for is not getting rid of it, but healing it and placing it in its proper place in orbit around and service to the sun.
Yeah.
Which is who we are ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm assuming that, these types of moments when you catch yourself can be helpful for your relationships, obviously for your inner self, and then obviously for your future. Because I tend to be the guy who needs to turn the mirror around, and then that's when I start behaving better, treating people better.
That's it.
Being a lovelier person.
That's it. And which is one of the things that I also get into the book, what you're pointing to, which is, the projection, which is a psychological defense mechanism, which basically simply is we judge something out there as bad, which is also here. Like homophobia is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Like, how often do we read about the political leaders or the religious leaders who are the loudest homophobes? Those are the ones that get caught with a rent boy coming into Miami airport with the rent boy. They
should probably get your book. And we're running out of time. I wish we weren't, because we could continue talking about this forever and ever and ever. Christian de la Huerta, thank you for being here. Where can they find your book? Soulfulpower.com, Amazon.
Soulfulpower.com is on Amazon. It's at your local bookstore, Books on Books.
Anywhere
books are sold.
Okay, good. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. For those of you who we won't see next week, from our Forward Miami to family to yours, happy holidays, stay blessed, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night.